Okay, today we are going to be looking at 1 Nephi chapter 3, verses 3 through 12. For behold, Laban hath the record of the Jews and also the genealogy of my forefathers, and they are engraven upon the plates of brass. Wherefore the Lord hath commanded me that thou and thy brothers should go unto the house of Laban, and seek the records, and bring them down hither into the wilderness. And now behold, my brothers murmur, saying, It is a hard thing which I have required of them, but behold, I have not required it of them, but it is a commandment of the Lord. Therefore go, my son, and thou shalt be favored of the Lord, because thou hast not murmured. And it came to pass that I, Nephi, said unto my father, I will go and do the things which the Lord hath commanded, for I know that the Lord giveth no commandments unto the children of men, save he shall prepare a way for them, that they may accomplish the thing which he commandeth them. And it came to pass when my father had heard these words, he was exceeding glad, for he knew that I had been blessed of the Lord. And I, Nephi, and my brethren took our journey into the wilderness with our tents to go up to the land of Jerusalem. And it came to pass that when we had gone up to the land of Jerusalem, and my brethren did consult one with another, and we cast lots, who of us should go into the house of Laban. And it came to pass that the lot fell upon Laban, and Laban went into the house of Laban, and talked with him as he sat at his house, and he desired of Laban the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, which contain the genealogy of my father. How does this stanza that I just read, that long-winded stanza, prove that the Book of Mormon was not written by Joseph Smith? Alright, we're going to be taking our first look at chiasmus, or inverse parallelism. So parallelism, first of all, is a unique writing style to the ancient Hebrews. They love to give two parallel phrases. This situation is the same literary device, only used in inverse by the Hebrews. So they call this chiasmus, or chiasms. So this is one example of the inverted parallel phrases from an English text. Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. So you can see it's two parallel phrases that are inverted. So Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and we're saying the same thing in the second one. A merry old soul was he, or he was a merry old soul, but we've just inverted the subject and the predicate. Old King Cole would be, we could look at as evidence A, a merry old soul B, and then a merry old soul again. We have another B, and then was he, referring to Old King Cole, back to A. So we have an A, B, B, A pattern in the parallelism. A more complex versions are found all over in Hebrew writings. So 75% of the Bible is said to be written in forms of Hebrew poetry and parallelism like chiasmus. Or 1,254 identified in the Old Testament alone, referring to chiasms. That's just the Old Testament. There's over 1,200 chiasms. They're found in every single book in the Old Testament. It was the standard Hebrew writing style. I mean, we go through junior high today and we learn about 3-paragraph format in an essay where we give 3 bullet points. We elaborate on each of those bullet points in a paragraph, and then we write a conclusion. That's a pretty standard writing style that's known to American English for our time. Well, this would be the standard for ancient Hebrews, and their writing style was to be able to use these inverted parallelisms to be able to share a point. So we're going to be looking at these verses that I read earlier. This is 1 Nephi 3 through 12. We always go right to verse 7, right? And the Lord giveth no commandment unto the children of men, save he should prepare a way for them to accomplish the thing which he commanded them. That is the focal point of the chiasm, and that's why it stands out to us. We love that verse. Poetically, it's beautiful, and it is the pinnacle of the chiasm. Our first point, we have A. Now this is a pretty complex chiasm. So we have A, or Laban, genealogy of my forefathers, plates of brass, all mentioned in verse 3 and verse 12. Down there at the bottom of the chart, you see Laban, plates of brass, genealogy of my fathers, same thing. Look at B. In verse 4, we're going to go to the house of Laban. B, we're going to go to the house of Laban. C, brothers murmur. D, go my son. E, my father. F, do the things. G, Lord hath commanded. And then we inverse it back the other way through the other verses. So go look at it again. Open up your scriptures or go back to the first slide and review it for yourself. But this is laid out in perfect chiastic form. And it is a verse that we read so often in the church, and we miss this chiasm, the complexity of it, this Hebrew writing style that is built right into this verse. So what does this tell us? Could Joseph Smith have known what a chiasm was? And could he have put him in there on his own in order to trick people into thinking that this was written by an ancient Hebrew? Well, first of all, there's no evidence that the research of chiasms had even reached the Americas, much less Palmyra in 1820. Later on, in about 1827, a book finally showed up in the American continent with research done in Europe about ancient Hebrew chiasms, but at the time of the publication of the Book of Mormon, nothing existed. There were no books with information on chiasms at the Manchester Library. In fact, the Manchester Library only had 421 books, and only 8 of those had anything to do with religion. Beside that point, that the knowledge was not available for him to obtain. If he somehow obtained that knowledge through word of mouth or met a neighbor who had this knowledge, who had visited Europe and was a scholar, if there was something like that, that he had somehow gotten this knowledge, then there would still have remained the formidable task of composing the well-balanced, meaningful chiastic structures which are found in precisely those portions of the Book of Mormon in which one would logically and historically expect to find them. In a 74-day working process of orally dictating the book with no source material, no major revisions, no books, no resources at his disposal, he would have had to integrate hundreds of chiasmus and thousands of literary Hebrew devices. And then, after publishing it, never mention it once to anyone that these were contained inside the Book of Mormon. Never pointed out, didn't wait for the publication of the book about chiasmus to come out, make the link between the chiasms and the research that was done, and say, look at this matches up perfectly with Hebrew. If he had known that what he had did, if he knew that he had planted these Hebrew literary devices in some way, shape, or form, you would have thought that he would have pointed it out to somebody at some point. But no one in the church knew that this existed all the way up until the 1970s. Could it have been an accident? Could he have accidentally put a bunch of Hebrew literary devices in the text without understanding what he did? Well, there's a formula that was put together by 2 theoretical physicists that would determine the likelihood of an accidental chiasm. Is it possible that you can create an accidental chiasm? Absolutely, you can accidentally create one. But the more complex the chiasms get and the more often they're repeated, the likelihood of those happening by chance decreases substantially. So this is the formula that they came up with. The factors are going to be the number of repeated elements in the chiasm. For example, in 1 Nephi chapter 3 chiasm that we read, there's 7 elements that worked out perfectly in the chiastic structure. The number of appearances of repeated elements that do not fit the chiastic form. So things that got put in that don't match the chiastic form. L equals the likelihood that the chiasm could have appeared by chance in a particular passage, which is what we are looking for. N equals the number of opportunities for the chiasm to appear by chance in the parent work. So depending on the size of the book, it's going to depend on the opportunities or the chances of something occurring like that by accident. And P equals the likelihood that the chiasm could have appeared by chance. These are the things that we are looking for. Using this statistical method, it was developed by Boyd and Farrell Edwards, 2 theoretical physicists. It was determined that when viewed in isolation, there's a 98.4% chance that this chiasm, the chiasm in 1 Nephi chapter 3, verses 3 through 12, was written by design rather than by chance. So that leaves a 1.6% chance. But furthermore, when you put it into that second formula that takes into the account all the additional chiasms that were in the book, then we get a 99.94% chance that this was composed intentionally. So what can we learn from this? There's a 99.94% chance that the chiasm was put in the Book of Mormon by the author intentionally, and there is zero known evidence or realistic hypothesis of how Joseph Smith or any scribes would have gained this knowledge in the American frontier. So we cannot conclude that Nephi was the author of the text from this data, but we can conclude that there's a very high probability that the author was a Hebrew from the 1st century BC and not an American farm boy on the western frontier.